Hello, SASA micro-volunteer. We are so happy to have you here. Welcome to our tutorial on grant hunting, a step-by-step video guide in which I will show you the different steps you need to go through in order to search for and find a grant, as well as how to collect the information we need and how to fill out the Google form. On this page, you will find a PDF document with the information you need in order to be a grant hunter micro-volunteer. Let's go over this document now. This document has different parts. Part 1 has the different steps that you need to follow in order to find a grant and implement the information you find on the internet into our document. Part 2 gives you an example with screenshots. Part 3 is a Q&A that will answer some of the most frequently asked questions. So, part 1, step 1. The first thing you will do is open a new Google page or any of your preferred search engines and enter one of the key terms provided by us. Examples are Cultural Outreach Grant or Award, Public Humanities Grant or Award, and Open Access Grant or Award. Of course, you are free to use your own search terms as well. When you press enter, you will see a list of all the possible awards that we have to filter through. Click on any of these links provided to see if SASA would be eligible for this grant or not. In addition, you can also start from any of the websites that we have provided for you here, as these are large databases in which one can search for a grant. For example, let's open the National Endowment for the Humanities website. Here, we click on Grants, and then Search All Grant Programs. On this page, we can enter keywords to search for in the database here, or we can browse through the list until we see a grant that looks interesting for SASA. For example, let's click on the Media Projects grant. In step 2, now that we have found the grant page, let's see the information that we have to collect. Here, you will look at the different pieces of information that we need to better understand what the grant is and what we need to do to apply for it. So the first thing that you need to do is find the name of the individual grant as well as the URL of the page. In this case, we have here the National Endowment for the Humanities Media Projects Grant, and here is the link above. Then we will check our eligibility. Are we able or are we allowed to apply for this grant? In this step, there are different pieces of information you need to look for. The first piece of information: do the aims or ambitions of SASA align with the grant's intention? In other words, do we do what they want us to do? In our case, we see that this grant is meant to be used for projects that engage general audiences with humanities ideas in creative and appealing ways. That is definitely SASA. The second piece of information: do you need to have a 501(c)(3) status? Or in other words, do you need to be a nonprofit to be eligible? Good news, SASA is a nonprofit, so we can apply for these specific nonprofit grants. Piece C: does the grant require you to have a minimum operational time? In other words, how long does an association have to exist before it can start applying for this grant? SASA has now been existing for almost a year. This means, for example, that we will not be allowed to apply for grants for which you need to have been existing for 3 or 5 years. However, we would still like to collect this information so that we can apply for it in the future. Part D: is there a point of contact to which SASA can reach out to check our status or eligibility? In other words, is there an email address on the site provided that we can use if we have more questions about this grant. Please write that down as well. For example, here we have an email address. Piece E. Does the grant specify how the money should be used? Sometimes grant money may not be used to pay for advertising or for the rent for a building, for example. Please check if there are any provisions on what the money can be used for. Don't forget that all of this kind of information might be found in a separate document on the website, often called guidelines or application instructions. In our case, we can find most of the information in the Media Project's Notice of Funding Opportunity document. Click on it. It will open a new PDF with an overview of the grant. And if you go down, you will see the eligibility. So here, for example, you have to be a 501c3 organization, which we are. Now that we have collected all this information, we can move on to step 3. In step 3, we are finding the value of the grant. How much money is the grant for? Does the grant have a specific amount that it can give us? Or does the foundation require SASA to request a certain amount for which to apply? In this case, as we can see here, there are different amounts, depending on the kind of project you want to make. Please note all this different information down. In step 4, we will check the deadline of the grant application. For example, we want to know if applications are on a rolling basis, as in you can apply whenever you want, or if they have a specific deadline. We also want to know if there are multiple steps in the application procedure or not. For example, do you first have to send in a letter of intent and then later the official application? Please note the different dates. If the deadline has passed already, please note when the next cycle of applications will be. In our example, a first optional draft is due December 2nd, while the actual application is due January 6th. The last step you need to take is to put all this information into our Google form on the SASA website, which looks like this. Of course, you can have the document open as you work to the grant website and just copy paste the information you find in the appropriate places as you find them. This will save you time. Then, having filled out the document, just click submit and you are done. You will have submitted your name and email address as well, so we can get back to you if we have more questions. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Tinne, following the following email address provided here. This is the end of the tutorial. Thank you so much for helping us out and for your support. We truly appreciate it. Together, we will save ancient studies.